All right, we'll convene then the Personnel Committee, Ojai Valley Sanitary District Personnel Committee for July 22nd at 5:00. We don't have any 2449 requests. Do we have any public comment?
No, there's a guest on there, so I don't know if they want to say anything.
Yeah, we could probably ask for public comment in the event that the guest wants to actually provide comment.
Yeah, the guest, they can't take out the small print right under the guest label.
It just says,
Phone number?
no, it just says unverified, so it doesn't have a name or anything.
Okay. Guest, you wish to speak during public comment?
You're on mute if you want to.
Could unmute and tell us if you want to speak or if you don't want to speak. Okay, well,
Done with that.
hearing none, I'm sorry, the lady wearing the
So
pink top.
this is Ellen. Ellen is from our consultant from CPS HR.
Very good.
So she's available and she's going to speak on a couple of these things.
I've been talking with Pam Derby on another
yeah.
topic. Yeah. Very good. Then we will close the period for public comment and take up item 4, reclassification of a vacant senior construction inspector position.
So this is being presented preliminarily to the committee with the hope of taking it to the full board in August. We recently had our senior construction inspector, Travis Fisher, resign from his position. He had been with the district for quite some time. He actually came with a very diverse set of experience already. He worked in our collection system. He had collection system certifications. And over time, as he transitioned to our senior construction inspector, we leveraged sort of his knowledge in very diverse ways. That was also reflected in his position description. And making it a little bit tough when he vacated the position to fill it to those specifications. The district has other program areas that actually require certifications that Travis did not hold. As we look to develop those programs in the future, we thought this was the better opportunity with it being vacant to reclassify it to an environmental compliance inspector. We plan to not leverage this position in our collection system at all. As through the budget, we actually added an operator position to the collection system, which we're working, yes.
What does leverage mean?
Utilize the position. So essentially we utilize the skills that he had to, for different things within the district. Utilize and leverage are sort of interchangeable terms. In any case, so we are utilizing this opportunity to reclassify this position and also require some standard CWA certifications that generally align with how we're going to utilize this position, which will no longer be in the collection system. Like I said, we added a position through the budget, another operator position, which we're currently recruiting for. So that should fill the need that Travis was occasionally utilized for in covering the collection system during the events of emergencies or long-term vacations or leaves or what have you.
PSL inspections, which he did.
He will do the PSL inspections. That's part of his environmental compliance.
The collection system, new collection system operator will do that.
No, this environmental compliance inspector will do it. Additionally, he did do some collection system project inspection, which was also sort of unique to this position. That will actually be handled mostly by Liz. And when we have too many projects going at one time, that will actually be embedded in the scope of our projects with our contractors and consultants, which is relatively standard for small districts anyhow. They generally don't have a construction inspector on staff for a district our size. We were fortunate that way that he had that skill set also. So the position that we created do not actually have those as part of them at all. But still gives us the leeway should they come with some construction related experience that we can utilize them for inspecting homeowner repairs, points of connection, those sorts of minor, more routine field inspections. But for the most part, we've actually created it to be a little bit more industry standard. The titling is industry standard and ties directly to a CWA inspection position certification, which essentially becomes an inspector for if you have a private sewer lateral inspection program, more regulatory related programs such as commercial fixture unit count inspections, restaurant inspections, which include fog inspections, fat, oil, grease, things in which we would essentially have regulatory requirements for. Also pre-treatment for any of our industrial users, which we have very, very few within our service area. But that falls more closely aligned with the skills and knowledge that would come with being certified as an environmental compliance inspector. And so that is sort of what our angle was, because we do have those sort of standard programs within our district, same as any other standard or with any sanitary district. And so feel that it was appropriate that we reclassify this position in hoping to recruit somebody who perhaps does this work at another district in a more sort of standard industry way. Other ways we'd be casting our net, looking for a lot of very specialized sort of knowledge, skills, and abilities that Travis had, that potentially would be very, very difficult to have somebody with that diverse skill set. And so Ellen, who's here, actually helped with this reclassification and creation of the new job description. It was something that actually was a very comparable thing when we compared Travis's description. We found lots of these within our comparable agencies and utilized them as sort of the basis for sort of creating Travis's, reviewing Travis's job description as it was, and then creating the comparison. So she was very, very familiar with his environmental compliance inspector. So it was an easy sort of leap to sort of hone this down to be a little bit more specific and industry standard. The report is contained in the work that she did, sort of describes essentially what the new scope of work is, the methodology for the classification and compensation. It's identical to that of the huge study that we did. It's just like I said, we did it for a singular classification. They made a salary recommendation. And so in my memo, I'm also requesting that we consider taking to the full board not only the approval of the new position description, but also the elimination on our salary schedule of the senior construction inspector and replacing it with the environmental compliance inspector at the recommended salary range as a result of the
Which
study.
is a series of steps.
Correct. Well, this particular one is actually one step on the, as was the senior inspector. It's a standalone classification here. However, the job description actually has the ability to have some advancement based on CWA certification, as do our operators and stuff, which is very specific to certification. Here we don't necessarily. The difference between the certification levels is sort of an enhanced knowledge or years of experience, but the job that they actually do here doesn't change significantly because we have sort of a minimum scope of work that has to be done
Better by the more senior people.
It's correct. It just is more experience, essentially more, presumably more sort of efficient, more independent, that sort of thing. But the job itself does not change here. The scope remains the same.
Okay. In what I understand to be now and future structure of the district as a whole, there's headquarters, there's engineering, and there's, I guess you call it operations, which is both collection and treatment plant. Where did the old senior construction inspector fall in that, and where does the new environmental compliance inspector fall?
So they fall in the exact same box. They fall in the exact same box because the positions are actually not that much different. It just eliminates some of the more diverse skill sets. So they will fall in the IT/engineering department, and then they will be supervised by the general manager until such time that there is an engineering manager that oversees that department with the knowledge and focus of essentially both our field inspector and our project areas. And that's actually on the original organizational chart. So essentially the organizational chart update is solely to swap these classifications in that existing box.
Okay. And I don't have a problem with that. One question I did have was that the environmental compliance inspector job description, study outcomes, says reviewing and approving private sewer lateral inspections. I asked who's going to be doing the report. You said the same person.
Yeah, so
And
essentially,
so this environmental compliance inspector, and it turns out the old position as well, the same person writes the reports and approves the reports.
well, they're not really reports per se. I mean, they're observations. It's actually a list of observations
Okay.
as viewed on a video produced by the plumber.
Okay.
And so essentially they view those, they cite a list of observations or deficiencies, if you will. So it's a report of deficiencies, but the actual creation of the actual report that's provided to the homeowner is actually created by currently by customer service and then signed off by me after review of the deficiency observations. So I make sure the report matches. Eventually that will actually be done by the administrative technician that will provide technical support in that department, but it's vacant right now. So.
Okay, so the creation, reviewing, and approving of these inspection reports is really just a certification, having seen the video or whatever, that the report is accurate. It's not
Correct.
certifying that certain things have to be done. That's a decision made at another place.
Well, the things that have to be done is the deficiencies that are cited have to be repaired because that's what our district code says. Our district
Okay.
code says that the sewer laterals have to be clear of any deficiencies under certain criteria under our private sewer lateral program requirements. So essentially they're notating their observations, which ultimately end up being deficiencies that require repair.
Okay. Any other questions for staff?
Go ahead. I was just gonna, and this is kind of basically reporting process and the reviewing is kind of what Travis was doing.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, so that part of it's really not gonna change. We're just gonna have a title change in somebody that won't work in the collection system.
Yes, that's exactly what it is. It changes, like I said, it changes the certification that's required to be more industry standard. Because Travis did not actually have an environmental compliance inspector certification, but he had other certifications that allowed him that knowledge to perfectly and amazingly do this scope of work. It does eliminate, like I said, some of those specialized things. It also adds a little bit more emphasis on sort of the infrastructure, if you will, of what they do being district code related or regulatory related as it pertains to either the FOG program, the PSL program, our commercial inspection codes, et cetera. So it sort of ties that in to make it more sort of the facilitator of compliance as it pertains to our code in these specific program areas, which are very standard to sanitary districts.
And the construction inspector kinds of things that are part of the old job description will likely be handled by an outside party.
They'll likely actually be handled by Liz, who did the majority of them anyway, with the exception of
Okay.
homeowner construction related things, which this person in all likelihood will have that skill set to do that and will have likely done that somewhere else based on our minimum qualifications. Just major construction projects in which, like, for example, if Toro was digging down Burnham Road, he'd observe that. That will not be done by this particular person. It will either be done by Liz, who manages that project, or that construction inspection will be embedded in part of, for example, like a Phoenix contract or something like that.
Sorry, please go ahead. You have more?
No, I've heard what I need to, I think, Jim.
Yeah, I just have a musing. I've noticed that I've noticed your ads in the Ventura County Star, quarter page ads looking for staff. That kind of hints to me that maybe it's harder to find good people these days. And you've been so specific in this description, which is good. I mean, the world's going that way. You've been so specific that if you had a board of a map of California, you put a dot everywhere, someone met exactly those criteria, there might not be very many dots on the map. I guess my question is, Are we flexible in our hiring processes when we're interviewing and all that? If we find somebody that's given proof that they're smart and they're adaptable and they're able to solve problems and they're quick learners, I think a lot of this stuff can be learned pretty quickly. Are we flexible in our hiring processes to allow us to hire some good people?
So unfortunately, the answer is it depends and maybe not. So because sometimes we are limited as to what we can have people do, because they must be certified to perform certain tasks. And we don't have, like, for example, an operator in training position in which we can, essentially bring somebody on who doesn't know anything, but maybe has a lot of construction experience or experience in a pipe trade, but didn't necessarily have the CWA certification. We're limited as to being able to do that, because if they don't obtain a certification or a Class B driver's license in a certain amount of time, they're pretty much unusable for us. They can't be on call. They can't do the work because essentially certification says they can't do the work because they haven't essentially been vetted to meet those minimum standards of education, years of experience, et cetera. So we are limited in some regard, which is unfortunate because they have to be able to perform these functions right off the bat to A, be supportive because we're a very small district, but B, also because certification dictates that they've sort of been vetted to have that knowledge and be able to safely do those things. So it depends is the answer. So for example, like this one, we would go out and we would accept an environmental compliance inspector 1 certification, which would basically say you've met the minimum level of knowledge and have a reasonable amount of experience to be able to properly put things in context. You can speak the language reasonably, and you have some ability to obtain more certification and progress here. That's the best we can do as a small district because somebody has to be able to actually hit the ground running and perform those core functions that we need because regulation says we have to be able to show that we have this particular program and we do our inspections on time and we produce these kind of results. And these are the kind of actions that we take for somebody who's not in compliance. And if somebody doesn't have that knowledge or ability to see those things through from beginning to end, fairly soon after they start, we get in a position of being non-compliant. And we don't have other staff that can sort of walk alongside them through that process because we just aren't that robustly staffed, unfortunately.
A very thorough response.
Well, I tried because believe me, we see some really great people and I'm like, just go get this. And like next year, maybe we'll have something come back, keep checking. We constantly see really great people in our community that would be awesome. And we coach them into what to do next to be competitive to apply.
Go get this certification
absolutely.
and we'll hire
I
you.
mean, we call people and we're like, gosh, unfortunately you have all this and it's such relevant experience, but here's what we need. Here, I'm going to send you the web link. Like we coach people to essentially be potential applicants that qualify at a later date because we see a lot of really great people. They come in here, they shake our hands, and it's really unfortunate because it's like those are the kind of people that you want to take the effort. It's just they don't meet our minimum. And our minimum standard in some of these positions are higher than some other larger districts solely because we don't have that sort of large, diverse workforce to have these different levels and still achieve sort of the core of what we need to do.
Well, I'm familiar with the certification process for water business, but I'm not as familiar with the wastewater. They're entry level, you just take a test and it gets you in the door.
Yeah, I think like a 1, you can do that, but it's not the same for treatment plant. Treatment plant has much more requirements and it's a little more black and white. You can't do these things, at all, even if you know them, if you don't have this certification. So the treatment plant gets a little bit tougher too.
You said you email people links. Could you email me the link?
Sure.
I'm looking for a career for my son.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's a good idea. Perfect. Okay, perfect. Okay, my action item, Jim.
Gotta have at least one.
So the feeling of the committee, is this a reasonable thing to do? Go to a more industry standard job description and the salary range, which covered several different levels, is more or less around where the old job was anyway, right?
It's very similar.
I support what she's trying to do here. I support having an updated job description. and obtaining employee division of labor, so to speak. So I think they're heading in the right direction. As long as there's flexibility, I'm worried that it's going to be harder and harder to find good people in California, because who wants to move here and try and buy a house?
People that are already living here in a house.
So I'm ready to recommend it to the board. I mean, that's my own personal opinion.
Yeah, I don't have any heartburn with it. I think that it follows kind of what we started out when we started this whole classification study early on, so.
Yeah, my thought would have been that we might have in the class and comp study have inserted this environmental compliance inspector job, because every job could have other duties as assigned, subject to the limitations of your certification.
Yes.
And that would have covered what Travis did, I
Yes.
think.
Well, I think the hard part was, I think we knew we were going to have to do this at some point. We never thought it was going to be obviously as soon as it was, because we didn't think Travis was going to
Sure.
resign. It just doesn't fall within a series of where Travis was, so it wasn't directly comparable because the certifications were different, and so it would have been creation of another position.
Okay, if we'd had this
Unfortunately,
position,
ran
he wouldn't have
somewhat parallel to this, but also somewhat overlapping. So it would have been in lieu of. So it's kind of we could have done it as a future state, but we, like I said, never envisioned that that was an imminent future state.
Okay, I think the sense of the committee is, let's take this as presented to the board.
I don't remember seeing it on the agenda for the board meeting today. Is it the future meeting?
Yeah, it'll be in August.
They have to agendize things without assuming that we're going to say yes.
Oh, really?
That'd be a fair way to put it.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. And we need the extra time. We have several recruitments out right now, and so we need to wrap those ones up before we go to this one.
All right, let's look at item 5, the cost of living adjustment.
Okay, so this is our annual review of cost of living. So June over June is the data that we adopt. We adopt it per the attached CPI price index, Los Angeles, Long Beach, Anaheim. So year over year, June is 3.2%. Generally, this would be a conversation of, here's our adopted salary grid, which is the policy you've set for our salary, and essentially the market data, which is very, very recent as we completed our class and comp study. And then we would recommend, staff would recommend taking to the full board a 3.2% application to the entire salary schedule, which would essentially shift the entire thing over 3.2%. In full disclosure, this time the conversation looks a little bit different, because you should know that this, because of the recent conclusion of the classic comp study, there are a number of employees, 3 to be exact, that won't be captured on that shift to the right, because where they landed on the salary grid exceeded the high of the market for their particular position. It's important to note that when we're talking about this, it's essentially positions in our district as represented on the salary grid, not person specific, but it is very hard for it not to be discussed as being person specific, which is why I feel like it's important to, sort of note that and not have the board assume that everybody will be the beneficiary of the 3.2% increase in their salary, because that's not the case. This happens.
Almost everybody.
Correct. So this happens. Sometimes when you complete a compensation study, you do have sort of a few wild cards of, that land off of your salary grid because of various factors. And there are ways to address this, or options available to essentially make this a little bit less unfortunate for the employees that are off the salary grid. And I brought Ellen here to sort of discuss things that she has presented to other agencies when discussing COLA at the conclusion of their studies, and when it essentially adversely affects some employees. So I'm going to turn this over to Ellen to sort of present options other than essentially freezing these employees until such time the salary schedule catches up, which is certainly an option if you choose to standardly apply the COLA to your salary schedule. But there are other options available that essentially are a little bit of a win-win, if you will. So Ellen, do you want to speak to those?
Sure, thanks, Allison. So Allison mentioned the first option that you could do was freeze the employees. Those employees who are above the current or the new salary range wouldn't receive a COLA until the salary range caught up with them. The second option that you could do is provide them with a one-time lump sum payment equal to the annual amount they would receive from the hourly increase in the COLA. This is probably the most preferable option when you have employees who are outside the salary schedule. They're still getting something, but it's not adding to their hourly rate and compounding over time. And then the last option you could do is award the employees who are above the salary scale the COLA into their hourly rate. This will create misalignments with your current salary scale and the market pay.
Which the problem.
Yes. So our recommendation would be to do the one-time lump sum bonus for them or freeze them where they're at. We would not necessarily recommend giving them the COLA in their hourly rate because of the misalignment it will create with you in the market.
Okay, questions for staff?
I don't know that I have any questions right now. I have some definite thoughts, but
I have some thoughts too, which I'm mulling over in my head. When I read the staff report, I thought we were just going to give out 3.2. And I knew there was a problem with it. Some folks who have too much, but I just hate to backtrack on somebody, you know, if they've been lucky enough to be slightly overpaid here. We should just congratulate them for their good luck and give them the 3.2. I'm reluctant to backtrack. If someone's been, you know, productive member of the team, I'm just thinking out loud here. Someone's been a productive member of the team, they're dedicated to the district. By some quirk, they got a little bit more of a salary. I mean, who's to say what the exact right true perfect salary is for anything anyway? It's all kind of there's a lot of injustice in salaries across the business world. So I have a reluctance. My gut feel is to give 3.2 to everybody, but on the other hand, also befuddled by the whole thing. So I'm open to suggestions.
Well, an alternative to leaving an individual outside the top end of their salary range, if you give them the same COLA, they remain just as far outside that salary range as they currently are, percentage wise or dollar wise or whatever. Seems to me an alternative might be to say, is there another of the salary classifications that this person falls into in which they're not outside the range for that, whether it's 118 or I think 118 was one of the numbers that was used in the previous item. But I don't know how much flexibility there is in that.
I have a question about her plan.
Let me address his question really quick though. Well, okay, so the answer to that, and Ellen can speak to this too, since she did our class and comp study. There are two things with that. You really are just changing the position in the market in a different way. So the market has been established and the grade that they're in is the established grade for the market. So if you move it so that they end up on the grade, you're doing the exact same thing. You're just making them on the grade instead of off the grade. You're essentially skewing the market that's been dictated for that particular position.
Reclassifying them.
Correct. The only unfortunate thing with a couple of these employees is they are part of a series. And so essentially, if you move any part of the series, essentially it messes up the entire series because these series some of them are weighted based on essentially industry differentials based on certifications, and then weighted based on essentially like internal equity or comparison of duties. And so when you move one part of them, you essentially have to evaluate how you've moved them for the entire series because they become disproportionate. Would that be an accurate statement, Ellen?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, so if we have a series, the people that don't want to get into individuals or dollar numbers, but if somebody is outside the range, and they're at the top of the series, there's nothing to be done. Except wait for the range to catch up, right?
Well, trying to think of how to answer this.
Can I answer that for you,
Yeah,
Allison?
I'm trying to, because these are certification specific, so it's like you are where you are, but Ellen, you can answer that.
What we would recommend is providing these employees with a one-time lump sum bonus. So if their hourly rate were to increase by, say, $1, we would recommend that you provide them with a one-time $2,080 bonus. We would not factor in any variable pay into the bonus so that they are still, in theory, getting the increase in the hourly rate. It's coming to them one time, though, and it's not compounding into their annual salary over time.
So we're basically, in effect, we're paying the 3.2% for 1 year and it's a lump sum.
Correct.
Correct.
But we're not changing the base, the next COLA.
All right, so they get it for 1 year, but then after the second year,
For the second year,
is
we'll have to wait and see where the salary ranges are. Are they back inside the salary range? We have anyone who's near the top and a 3.2 would put them outside the range?
Because you're shifting your whole salary, so you're actually moving it
Yes.
closer to these
Yeah.
folks. So anybody that's already in there is going to stay in there. They're going to just essentially become more in there. You're moving the salary grade closer to them if you don't move them further to the right by individually adding that. That's what she's saying is you won't skew your market data because you're not pushing it further this way for individuals. You're actually moving the salary grade step closer to them, but you're giving them essentially the incentive that they would receive had they been captured by that. But you're essentially moving it closer to them. So when you have the conversation next year, they're closer. And then depending on what the COLA is, I mean, it looks different. You don't get to reevaluate the market data unless you do a compensation study again. But essentially, if, for example, now they're 2% outside of the market and you're talking about a 3.2 COLA next year, well, they could get it in part, or you can essentially bridge the gap and say, okay, well, you get 1.2 and we'll give you a 2% lump sum bonus this time. And then the following year, they're definitely on the grid now, or reasonably if you get average inflation. Essentially, the unfortunate thing is if you individually allocate a COLA to them without, and shift your grid this way, but you're moving them further this way, what happens is you're compounding the problem for the next time
They're
that you do
staying
a
outside the-
compensation study, you're going to land in the same place because essentially you can, if you take the rate of inflation, say, for example, someone ends up 13% over here. Think of inflation at, 2 or 3%. It's going to take them even more years to get on the salary grid. You're compounding the problem. Plus you're creating, disproportionality internally in your pay scale, because essentially you've adopted a different market for other employees. If that makes sense.
Makes sense.
Yes, it makes sense, but it just doesn't seem to be a big problem to me. We're talking about a 3.2% problem on a few employees. It's not like as a whole is 10% over. There's a couple of employees that we're going to compound the problem by making it 3% higher than it is now. I'm not sure we're solving a problem that's a real problem. We get a reputation amongst the industry that we overpay some people. I think that's good for us. Because my concern is the other side. My concern is, are we going to be able to keep hiring people, good, worthy people? And that's where I think we should focus our efforts.
As we're recruiting with the salary scale, which the old one or the old one plus 3.2%, whatever. It's how we're hiring people. It's not, hey, come look at us. We pay people outside the grid. That's not a part of the recruitment.
That part of our,
Well-
Thing.
you know, the staff are gonna be talking amongst themselves.
It could, I mean, the reality is, and I mean, Ellen and I have talked about this, there are agencies that choose to shift their entire grid outside of market this way to be extra competitive. Essentially, but you address your entire grid. You basically say, these are our positions. We want to be 20% above max market, and you shift your entire grid this way, and then you're incredibly competitive because, but your market is equitable because your salary grid is equitable. And
But
so,
the costs
so
are
you can do
a lot
that, but
higher.
the costs are a lot higher. But there are agencies that choose to do that. Is like, they want, this is max market. This is like based on everybody. We want to be better than everybody by X amount. And that's what they adopt as their policy to do that. So you can do that, but you do that with your entire grid. It's you create your market. Our market is established based on our actual grid. That's what it says. It's the high and the low of the market. That's accurate, correct, Ellen? Yes.
Yes, that's accurate.
I had some conversation about this with Allison probably a few weeks ago. We talked about this would be coming down the pipe this year. Like Director Kintosh, I have some real severe heartburns with somebody not getting something. We've chose to overpay them and pay them out of their box per se. That's our bad. But for us to say, because we did that now, you're not going to get a cost of living increase this year, because that's not right. The price of milk for these people is still the same. Their gasoline is still the same. Their cost, just because they make a little bit more money doesn't necessarily mean they don't deserve that.
I think the suggestion is that we give them the COLA as a lump sum without changing a salary.
Okay, let me, you cut me off here midstream. I wasn't finished yet. I hadn't thought so much out of the box about this one-time payment. Sounds to me like that's something that might be a possibility to solve this issue we're in. Say we're looking at maybe 3 employees that are this way, or is it more than?
No, it's 3.
Why are they?
If we were to meet with these employees individually and tell them what our intent was of this, are they gonna understand this? Or is this gonna be something that's gonna cause?
I mean, I can't speak for all, I don't want to speak for all of them directly with you. I have spoken to all of them in anticipation of this, so that essentially they were prepared for the conversation of what the board may elect to do based on the options available to them. I can't say for certain that there's, an ideal option necessarily. Obviously not to be Y-rated and not get anything was not a favorable option.
Sure.
I think they understand that they are off the salary grid. I think they all have individual sort of reasoning and historical sort of context as to how they got off the grid. I'm not sure that any of the 3 necessarily don't have questions or concerns about their job description, thus how it dictated their classification, that may eventually come to the board as a consideration for separate contract with CBS HR Consulting. More of a relook at the class and comp study specifically to theirs to verify that that's actually where they landed. That would require a reevaluation of that entire series because they're weighted proportionally. But I can't speak as to what would be the most favorable option other than obviously they don't want nothing. I think they understand the one-time 3.2% as being the reasonable option that maintains the integrity of the market data, to be, as long as there's a discussion, continuation of the discussion, obviously next year about if they land off the grid still, what does that look like? But they do understand that this is the market data as it's represented. They understand that the COLA is merely a conversation about the policy that's been adopted and making the standard market adjustment to them, and that it's position specific, not person specific. Said before, it is very hard to look at it in that context when you're talking about it as far as getting something and not getting something. I mean, I tend to agree with Ellen in that there's a significant necessity to maintain the data that has been, produced by the, the consultant. It is a representation of the market in its most recent sense. We do it every 5 years. We generally adopt that as what we're going to have our salary schedule be moving forward. I think once we start sort of choosing off of that, it would classification and compensation study, because you start sort of messing with your market data, if you will. It creates, obviously, it messes with the integrity of the data, but it also, like I said, creates sort of inequities because you're picking and choosing what to mess with the market data for certain positions and not for others. And so then there's not internal sort of equity in the market. I think that's a real downside when you do that. And eventually it compounds and you end up with the exact same problem next time. So I think there's an opportunity to sort of try to right the ship, because the next time you go and evaluate them, they shouldn't be as off unless they truly are a very competitive position in the market. That's sort of that's my recommendation of it, just because, like I said, I think you're compounding the problem potentially if you try to make it not position specific and you make it person specific.
Yeah, I'm definitely not in favor of going in and changing, massively readjusting what we've just gone through, because we did that to get a very comprehensive study and find some place that we were at going forward. But I just also want to make sure that we are being fair with our employees and they are being paid what they need. And the one-time thing is maybe a better way to do it and keep things in line. And maybe that's what we need to look at. That's just my thoughts.
I kind of cut you off. I think you were next.
Oh, I'm in favor of the middle of the choices, because for each individual who is outside the grid right now, we're making them whole for the year. We're just not perpetuating their outsideness. And if they're still outside next year, we do 2.5 or 4 or whatever, we can do one time again, make them whole for the year and wait for the grid to catch up. And it's a decision we'd have to make every year. But it is a decision that means nobody loses anything, except they have to wait longer to be back on the grid to have the COLA affect their base salary. But in terms of actual cash, they're still going to be whole every year.
My opinion has finally gelled. I was on the fence for a while, but I've come to kind of a more firm opinion about what we should do. We're putting ads in the paper, quarter-page ads. We've been looking for people. We've lost some key people like Travis, and we need to fill some positions. And I don't think this is a good time to be singling out anybody for. I mean, my opinion is 3.2 across the board. Give us another year to worry about how we're going to implement this. Their options. We're not approving a 3.2 for the next 10 years. We're doing it for only 1 year. Let's do it now. Let's spend the next year getting ourselves in a stronger position with our staff, where we have an adequate number of staff, and we backfilled some of those positions and have maybe even a little bit of surplus. So I'm in favor of the 3.2 for everybody. Probably wrong opinion.
Well, it all comes down to a recommendation to the full board anyway. Where do you stand, Bill?
Give me a minute to think about it.
Jim is in favor of a standard COLA. I'm in favor of a modified COLA, which says you still get that amount of money, but it doesn't affect your base salary.
For 1 year.
1 year. And then we look at the problem again, but with the guarantee that the whole salary grid is going to move, and that person will be either back inside the salary range, or they will be closer while still outside.
Let me ask this question. How far out are these three people?
Okay, well, so
Is this something that we're gonna correct in 2 years, or are we looking at
it depends.
realistically 10 years?
Depends. I think you could reasonably correct it in 2 years for most of them. I think it will take 3+ years for potentially somebody else, depending on what inflation is. Okay, but here, let me throw this out as a.
Somebody else,
the
one
third
of the
person,
three people.
Correct. Here's something that I want to throw out that is outside of the cost of living thing, but part of this conversation because it affects the actual policy itself. Should we be unsuccessful in our current recruitments, which is possible, they're not closed, but it is possible. It would indicate to some extent that we are not competitive in the market currently. We may have to bring to the personnel committee the consideration of shifting our salary grid to be more competitive, which would solve this problem. So
Well,
I
it
pres-
depends how
I present
far out people are.
I present that as something that may come up if we are unsuccessful in our recruitments, because we have numerous vacancies, and so it is impacting operations. And we are seeing that there are numerous agencies that have chosen to do that because they are having the same problem as us in this same area. This may come as a, what do you want to do? Because we can't get enough of a competitive applicant pool. And our 3 vacancies, for the most part, maybe 2 of the 3. And one of them this would be the second time we've been successful in it and previously been very successful in it. That would be probably one of the only solutions that we would recommend because they are so specific in their job descriptions that they're not really negotiable that way based on necessity for the district. It's not like we could be like, let's reclassify it to make it easier like that, or cast a bigger net, because we've done that in our second attempt for one of them. And so this is a conversation they may actually come up as something to consider, just because it is looking like people are buying their way into the market, if you will, to try to get people. Throwing that out there as something that may come up and correct the issue depending on what.
Legal counsel weigh in here. I appreciate that you're giving a preview of what issues might come up related to this. But we do need to focus just on this discussion of the cost of living salary adjustment, since that's what's on the agenda today. With the acknowledgement that there is overlap with this class and cost study, but that should be addressed at a different time.
Okay, the next time this comes up, the agenda, I would like that joined together so we can discuss these 2 pieces dovetailed together. So I think it's important that they are discussed together. I think I would support giving everybody the 3.5 this year, 3.2.
Okay,
And getting some more information on this and seeing what we need to do for sure.
okay. I'd like to see people that are outside the grid get the cash equivalent. And if we have to move the grid, then we can adjust their salaries at that point because they're back inside the grid. As it stands, committee 2-1 says 3.2 for everybody.
I would say with the caveat that these people that are outside understand that we are looking at them and they are gonna be, at some point, there is gonna be an adjustment.
Either an adjustment of the salary scale
Something, yeah.
or something like a one-time, I don't know.
I think I'm not following the recommendation because
The recommendation is 3.2 for everyone right now. We're basically taking the problem of people being outside the salary scale, taking that problem down the road, because the salary scale may change. Or we may take an alternative approach a year from now.
so what I'm hearing is that we will adjust, we're making the recommendation to apply 3.2% to our salary grids. Let's shift it this way. We are also going to pay individually 3.2%, which essentially shifts them more this way.
To the people that are outside the grid. Is that correct?
That's
Everybody
my,
gets the 3.2.
Everybody gets the 3.2. That's the sense of the committee. Let's, we have 5 minutes left to get to item 6, discussion of agenda items for the next personnel committee.
So we have a pre-scheduled next personnel committee meeting, I believe it's August 6th, in which the cafeteria plan will be on that agenda because the health insurance premiums have been released. So that will be on there. That's generally an August agenda item, scheduled early August so that hopefully we can potentially get that on the board agenda for the regular August meeting. Is there anything else that we want to be put on that personnel committee agenda?
I think maybe an update of the recruitment efforts so that we can begin to get a sense of how necessary it may be to move the salary grid. More than the 3.2%. Anything else, Bill? Yeah.
not that I can think of right now.
That's a good one with it.
Okay.
I would have been to-
Okay, so I have that. So essentially, I'll have this as the full board unless otherwise altered at for an alternate recommendation at August, because it's the end of August, it would go anyway. So I guess this could be potentially a continued or altered discussion at that time. So if the committee wants to make an alternate recommendation, because this would, if anything that you would recommend in August would trump this if it affects the salary grid per se. Just so we want to do them in succession because one gets retro to July 1st. So we can talk about that, but they will have awkward timing.
No, let's just leave it as it is.
Reports, committee members,
Nothing.
okay. General managers, all right. 5:57, committee meeting is adjourned.